On our previous video, we went over on how to set up a form, right? So if I go to my data, both either in my spreadsheet or in my data builder in Glide, I have this row that I filled out with this form, right? But right now that information is only living in the spreadsheet and it's not showing in the app. So how can I see that information? I can either add that information, that number of rows, into any of my details view, or I can have a new tab pointing to that sheet. So let's add a new tab, and this will point to the forms. And forms, here we go. So as you can see, Glide already made this a list style view, and if I click this item, right now we only have one item, right? So by default, that's how Glide brings up the information, a title and then a bunch of action texts, each for those values. Then these are not the appropriate way to show these values, right? First, I don't want the user to see the UID, the timestamp doesn't look nice, the checkbox that we have shows true instead of a checkbox, so let's make this look better. So I go back to my Forms tab, I click this one, and then let's change the components that we have here, right? So instead of the title, I want to send, first we have the title here of the screen. So let's name it form, because this is our form, right? Then I'm gonna delete every component that I have here on my right, and then I will add some others that I think are better. So I will add on my top right corner, I will add a text component, and this will point to the answer A. I can change the style, so like let's make this big, and then I'll center this. So I have that first answer all the way here. The next question was in numeric value. So let's have maybe an action text, because then we have the name answer B, and then the title will be answer B, and then it's 10, right? Finally, we have a checkbox. So the best way to show a checkbox is with a basic table. And let's point this to our third, right? So we have the question that we asked, which was answer C, and then we will show if a checkbox if the user marked it as such. Otherwise, it'll be an empty checkbox. And we can always add a title to this table and a footer. Okay, let's delete this. Then we have, if I go back to my data, we have the user email, which I don't want to show. I only want to keep that to myself as the admin, but I don't want to show the user his own email. And then we have the timestamp, which is in an ugly format. So since this is a date column, we can change the format. If we click the little arrow here pointing down, we can edit this value and change the style. So pretty much we are not doing anything, because Glide already by default decided to put this as date and time, date format medium, and time format without seconds, which is fine in our case. You can always change this to date only, time only, and then also change the date format to medium, short, and long, right? So let's add that to our basic table. So let's add a new row that will point to the timestamp, and then I don't want this style, so let's say date. So this looks maybe kind of better than the way it was previously, right? Maybe I also want the user to edit this form. Let's say they made a mistake and they should have answered for answer B their phone number, and they didn't. So let's go back to my forms, to my list, I click this item, and then in my right, in my components, I have my layout, which we just edited, and then we have the edit button, and then I can allow users to edit. Now, remember that we asked for in the form, we didn't ask, we used the user email special value, right? And this is when it comes up, because then I can set a condition for when the editing is allowed. And I only want the user who created that form to be able to edit the form they created, right? I don't want other users editing the form I made because they don't know what I should have said or not. Because now we have that user's email, then we can add a condition here that will be user email is signed in user. That way the pencil comes up here, right? That way, since you can see here in the preview as I'm signed in with my personal email, and then this form has my email, Clyde added my email because I was signed in with this email, right? So since here on the edit, we have a condition when the user can edit as long as it is his own form, right? Because that user email is the signing user. We can also allow users to delete, and then the condition will be the same. I don't want anybody else but me, the user who created that form, to be able to delete this whole form. So I will add a condition when user email is signing user, right? So only I can edit and delete this form. Now, when I click the edit pencil, this shows up, right? And then if, for example, we wanted the user to change the timestamp, this is the worst way we can make it happen because the user won't be able to edit that timestamp the right way. We definitely don't want the user editing their email address because then we'll lose track of who's changing things, right? So here I have my components on my right, and I'm going to change them or delete them. Now, deleting components on my right doesn't mean that you will delete the data in your spreadsheet. It only means that the user editing that form in your app won't be able to access those values anymore. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the user email, this text entry component pointing to my user's email address, because I don't want users editing their email address here. So I will delete this component. So you see that email address is no longer here. So the user won't be able to edit their address. I also don't want users editing this unique ID because they don't even know what it means. So I'm going to delete the component, which again doesn't mean that I'm deleting that data in my spreadsheet, right? So now I'm left with four text entry components. Now I have, remember when we set up the form, we had a text entry component for the first answer, but for the second answer, we had a number. For the third answer, we had a checkbox, and the timestamp was a special value. So the only one that's a text entry component is the first one. So let's delete this 2 and 3. Now, if we want that user to edit the second answer, we have to make it a number entry pointing to answer B. And then we can have, instead of answer B, let's say add your phone number. Right, so now it makes sense that instead of just a number, it's a phone number. We also might want to allow the user to change the timestamp. Probably not, but let's just go over it. Because the timestamp is made by default. We don't want users editing that, but just for the sake of this lesson, add that. So we will add a date and time picker, which is an edit component. We also have a lot of buttons down here, but the only ones that you will be using are the edit components because the user is editing their form, the form that they already made, that row, right? So let's choose the date and time and then point it to the timestamp. So now instead of that ugly line of text that didn't make any sense, now we have the calendar come up with date and time. And that's how users edit or delete items. Then we set up a condition that only the user who created that form, who answered that form, will be able to edit or delete that form. So you can always copy this app. It's somewhere here in the notes. You can copy this app and play around with this.